The governor of South Dakota may have just taken a monumental stand for the American people, and you didn't even hear about it. But you're about to with Tucker Carlson. But first, do you remember when Joe Rogan said this?
Well, that's why the World Economic Forum and things along those lines are so fascinating, because you can see that they're the ones that are holding the strings that dangle the narratives in front of the people, that make them attractive. And then you realize, like, well, this is not our real problem. Our problem is not really these narratives. Our problem is who's promoting these narratives and what are they doing while they're promoting that, and we're distracted.
A great question posed by Joe Rogan. And this bill that we're about to get into is a perfect example of what they try to do while we're all distracted.
So the drama in the banking sector, the collapse of Silicon Valley Bank, has a lot of Americans concerned about how to protect their money. And of course, politicians are using that concern to their advantage as always. Several states are now trying to centralize currency with a so-called central bank digital currency, which is, by the way, not currency at all. It's software. But they're going to do it for your own good. Obviously, this is a tool of total social control. If they control your money, if they can zero out your bank account with a keystroke, then you have no autonomy. They control you. Well, in the state of South Dakota, legislators just passed a bill that would have changed the definition of money to exclude cryptocurrency, and that would put the state on a path to centralized digital currency. South Dakota's governor, Kristi Noem, the only governor we're aware of who's paying attention to this, vetoed that bill. She joins us tonight to explain why. Governor, thank you very much for doing this first and for coming on. Why did you do it? You're obviously under pressure not to veto it, but you did. Why did you?
I'm just going to go into a little background before she goes into her explanation of why, just so you understand what it is that she saw wrong with this bill. She doesn't actually say it in here, but she does write about it quite a bit because she had to. She's a governor. She has to actually say why she's trying to veto this bill. So here it is. It is House Bill. That's what HB stands for. House Bill 1193 adopts a definition of money to specifically exclude cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin as well as other digital assets. At the same time, these UCC revisions include central bank digital currencies as money. You know why that is very important to note? Is because this happened before the Federal Reserve announced FedNow, which is a central bank digital currency. Now, they're just saying that it's a payment plan and that it's not a digital currency. It's not going to replace digital currencies. But if this bill passes all across the United States, it could easily replace things like Bitcoin. And then as we keep on going cashless, it would then also replace cash. And it would be the only currency that you have available to you. It would be the beginnings of a social credit system. So from here, let's go. Wrote Governor Noem in her veto letter, by expressly excluding cryptocurrencies as money, it would become more difficult to use cryptocurrency. By needlessly limiting this freedom, House Bill 1193 would put South Dakota citizens at a business disadvantage. Governor Noem has consistently advanced an open for business approach to the economy, emphasizing on Illuminati. That's what they do when they don't want me to talk. Emphasizing individual freedom and personal responsibility. This extends to the ways in which individuals choose to make transactions in a free market economy. By defining money in this proposed way, House Bill 1193 opens the door to the risk that the federal government could easily adopt a central bank digital currency, which then may become the only viable digital currency. And again, not just the only viable digital currency, it could possibly become the only viable currency for people. All this talk about, the dollar being ousted all over the world and a possible collapse and everything like that, if that were to happen, it would be very easy to suggest to the American people that we all should be leaning on this as a way out of this economic disaster. Now, that's not happening, but there have been talks about certain things happening with the dollar all across the world Russia and China taking certain measures. So, and I just think it's an all-out attack on the U.S. people and the government. Continued Governor Noem from the inside and out. At this moment in time, such a government-backed electronic currency has not been created. Again, at this time. But just a few weeks later, so they tried to push this bill in, and a few weeks later, at the end of March, FedNow was announced. So they wanted to put this in now, or put this in then, knowing that it was going to be released anyway. This could have been really bad for South Dakota. I'm trying to figure out what other states are involved in this and to see if they actually passed it through or if they're getting vetoed as well, but I haven't heard anything and I can't find anything. It would be prudent to create regulations governing something that does not exist yet. More importantly, South Dakota should not open the door to a potential future overreach by the federal government. This is written by Christie herself. She is amazing. And now I'm going to let her go on with her explanation as to why she decided to veto this bill, if it's not clear enough already.
Well, Tucker, it was the right thing to do. I became aware of this bill. It wasn't introduced until almost halfway through our legislative session. We started reading through this bill that was over 110 pages long. It was sold as an update to the guidelines of the Universal Commercial Code, backed by all of our financial institutions, our banks. As we started reading through it, we saw the section of the bill that changed the definition of currency. And essentially what it did was pave the way for a government-led CBDC, and it also banned any other form of cryptocurrency or Bitcoin or digital currency that existed. So for me, it very clearly was a threat to our freedom. In South Dakota, we are the session that completes its business earliest in the year. We are the first ones to really look at this bill and find out the truth of what's in it. And I did veto that bill. I'm asking my legislators to change their minds, to make the right decision and help me kill this bill once and for all. But I'm telling you, Tucker, we've got the same language coming to over 20 other states. I believe it's to pave a way for the federal government to control our currency and thus control people. It should be alarming to everyone, and it's being sold as a UCC guidelines update.
It was disguised as an update. And I use the word disguise. I don't think that's an overreach for me to use that, because it was tried. First of all, they tried to slip it in halfway through. Now, when you're going to hear more of her talking about this, this is a 110-page bill that they tried to slip in at the end. Well, what are most people going to do? If you and I are sitting down for a few hours and then I hand you something and I say, hey, this is just an update. It's 110 pages. You can just sign off on it. You're going to go, 110 pages. I don't want to read that right now. But instead, this woman did the thing that none of us do when we sign off on these agreements when we're online, that none of us do when we're handed contracts. She actually read it. Kudos to her.
There's no rush to do this. We need to be smart and make sure that we're doing what we can to protect people. I find it ironic that we also are having this discussion at the same time we have banks and credit card companies talking about coding gun and ammunition in a separate code so they can track it. So not only can they tie these two issues together, if the government doesn't approve of what you're purchasing, if they have the only form of digital currency out there and that is endorsed and utilized in the country, they can control how you spend that money and thus take away all your freedom.
It's so nicely put, and I don't think you're overstating at all the significance of this. Really quickly, do you think, and you want to give everyone the benefit of the doubt on their motives, but do you think that legislators in your state understand what this bill was actually designed to do?
You know, I don't know if they read it, Tucker. That's what is alarming to me, is it was over 110 pages long, and they were told by lobbyists that they had listened to for the last 20 years that it's fine. It's just a regulation update. This is what we do, is adopt federal regulations. But if you start reading it, you see in there is a redefinition of currency, that it says government CBDCs are okay if they're run by the government. But any other form is then banned. It is clearly a change for how people's assets are utilized. It clearly limits the freedom of people to use other forms of currency that they may choose to if it is a digital currency. And it is clearly putting power into the hands of government. If anything we should have learned the last several years is the government can't be trusted.
Is there any room in South Dakota? Can I come over? Is there anybody who watches this in South Dakota? Is there a room I can to hear that from somebody, because she's a governor, right? So I doubt she's been in politics for a couple years. She's been in politics for a long time. And for her to say that you can't trust the government, for her to have that attitude, it says a lot. It says a lot. And I'm not going to get into an anti-trusting the government rant or anything like that. But I will say the fact that it came from her mouth is something to really be aware of. And it seems like she really understands how these things all connect. And I think that's the thing that's missing for a lot of people. They hear about one thing that's just for convenience and they're like, oh, well, that's just that. Then they hear about FedNow and they're like, well, that's just a completely separate thing. But she was able to actually see, like, they're bringing this thing up, they're bringing this thing up here. And with these two things together, they're going to be able to track everything you buy and decide what you can buy and control. She understands. I wish more politicians would take this type of stance. I don't know what's in her that makes her like that, or if she's always been like this. I have no idea, but it's really good to see, because honestly, I don't like having the narrative in my mind that you can't trust anyone in the government. I don't like that. I want a narrative of, the same way that I think about police officers. So yeah, there's some bad ones, but there's a lot of good ones. And the good ones don't get as much publicity as the bad ones. And that there are some good people who are in the government who are really working in our best interests and are really in it for the right reasons and aren't just lining their pockets. I really do want to believe that. And, for this moment, for what I just saw within this governor, I can believe that today. And obviously I know there's so many that you can't trust, but you gotta recognize the good when you see it. You can't just blanket it over with all the bad that you've seen. You gotta recognize that good. So I'm so glad that she's doing what she's doing. I'm so glad that she's actually being a voice for the people and going to other governors and other lawmakers and asking them to actually kill this bill, because this is something that needs to be killed. We can't have something like this in the country, because something like this just spreads. It's within several states, but several turns into a dozen, turns into a couple dozen, turns into the entire nation. And then what happens from there, who knows? But it's best that we stop it now, like she has. So thank you so much for watching. Again, if you're into your local government, or if you're not, look into this. See if this is something going on in your state. Really try to find out. It was disguised as a UCC update. See if that, and what does UCC stand for? Uniform Commercial Code. So if your state has anything going on with the Uniform Commercial Code, like, find out. It probably won't have the same House bill, but that's what it's called. And the Uniform Commercial Code, it addresses emerging technologies, providing updated rules for commercial transactions involving virtual currencies, distributed ledger technologies, including blockchain, artificial intelligence, and other technological developments. So if your state has anything going on with that, look into it. Write to your governor. Show up at town halls, like, do everything you can. Get involved in your local government. It's really our responsibility as citizens, right? You're the lifeblood of the country. So you should be working in its best interest the same way you want to see politicians work in your best interest. Other than that, I'm out. Subscribe.